everyone, Brittany here and welcome back to my channel. It has been a good while since I spoke with you guys last. Oh my goodness, so much has happened. Thank you to everyone that has sent me such good wishes on Twitter and here on YouTube, and just everyone that congratulated me and Nick for having Emerson. We are so thankful that he is here. He is such a cutie. I'm absolutely in love with him. He is amazing. And you guys will get to meet him very soon in his 1 month update. Yes, it's been a month since he was born. Oh my gosh, what? It has been a crazy 4 weeks, honestly. It's been so crazy. And there's a lot that's happened and everything, but this video is just about my labor and delivery story and basically just letting you guys know how everything went. Now, I did vlog it because I wanted to vlog it. Originally this was going to be like a whole vlog video, but it ended up not working out so that it could be a very cohesive video, and because of that I decided to make this sit down video, and I'll insert the clips of the different video footage that I got of the whole process of everything. Towards the end of my delivery, I didn't really have much footage just because things got really intense and really serious, and so I just didn't get a chance to vlog it. I didn't have my camera set up. I was gonna have my camera set up for when he was actually born, so everyone would be able to see the reaction and everything of us finally getting to meet him right as he's born. Everything got so crazy so fast that I didn't get a chance to set that up and everything. Yes, so this is going to be a little bit longer of a video just because I'm explaining everything, and it's just something that I want to document as well. Let's just jump into it. So the last update that you guys saw of my pregnancy updates was week 37, which, that was a while ago. And I actually went past my due date. I went past August 16th with him. And at that point I had checkups every single week, and my doctor, she checked me during week 38, 39, and 40, and each of those times I was only dilated a little bit and not 100% effaced. So she said that he's probably going to be staying in there past my due date, so we kind of started expecting him to come later. Towards, I think it was week 39, she said, hey, what if we set up an induction date? If he's not here by, this time, then we would induce you. I originally was 100% against being induced. I want to have my labor activated naturally. I wanted to go into labor based off of my body being ready. I don't know, something inside of me just said, you know what, it doesn't hurt to set up an induction date. You can only be pregnant so long. You start running into problems with the placenta and with the baby having enough amniotic fluid, so it is a little bit dangerous to go past 41 weeks. So I was like, okay, let's set it for when I'm past my due date, of course. And she's like, okay, that sounds great. So we set up my induction date for Monday, August 21st. I didn't know and I didn't realize that that was actually the day of the solar eclipse. And I later told my family, and they're like, oh, that's the solar eclipse day. And I was like, oh, well, that's my induction date. So during the eclipse, I will be possibly getting induced. Week 39 happens, week 40 comes and goes. I go in on my due date, still not 100% effaced. I'm only 1.5, I think she said, centimeters dilated. I was not getting anywhere. And at this point, I started getting really nervous. I was getting antsy, and I started trying to do all the stuff that I had read up online to kind of activate labor. I was using evening primrose oil, both orally and internally. That was fun. I made Nick, when we would go to the stores, park super far away so I could walk to the store, walk inside. Nothing was happening, nothing was changing. I never lost my mucus plug, nothing was getting anywhere, and I was so frustrated. But this is very typical of your firstborn baby. I read up online, everyone was like, yeah, I went past my due date with my first, but then my second was right on time, or blah blah. This was kind of normal. My doctor wasn't worried. My blood pressure was still at a good range. His heartbeat was at a great range, so she wasn't too worried. My due date passed right, and my induction date was the 21st, which was, I think, 5 days. Yeah, it was 5 days from my due date. I just waited and I waited. I waited that whole weekend, and I was like, come on baby, let's activate, let's do this. I was doing everything, was walking everywhere. Nothing was working, and I made it to my induction date. And the day before my induction, I actually was almost going to cancel it because I was so frustrated. I wanted my body just to actively go into labor. I was just really nervous about being induced. I didn't want more chemicals and more drugs put into me to help activate my labor. I had heard that being induced can also cause you to have a longer labor. I didn't want that, of course. That does not sound fun to me, but there was nothing, you know, I could do. I almost canceled my induction and my husband and my mom were like, no, like, let's just go in. Let's just go see how it goes. And I was like, okay, sounds good. I packed my bags and I actually went in on the night of the 20th at 10 o'clock in the evening. And then my induction would basically start the next day, or I'd most likely have him the next day. Today, I am going in for my induction. Yes, here we are. I am ready to go, ready to have this baby. It's about 9 o'clock at night and my check-in time is 10 o'clock. And yeah, so just preparing, getting ready. I have all my bags packed and everything. Everything else is like in the car except for this stuff. So yes, we are ready to go. So I go in, it's 10 o'clock, and we check into the room, and I get to kind of see how everything's set up. They explain the process to me. And basically what we were going to do is start with Cytotec pills, which are these tiny little tablets, and they insert it vaginally, and that helps soften your cervix if your cervix isn't dilated enough, which I wasn't. And also I wasn't effaced enough. It was mostly my effacement that was more behind than anything. So at 10:59, or it was like 11 o'clock I think, they inserted the very first dose of Cytotec. And I had to wait 2 hours for it to kind of start working, and then they would check me at that point, and then I'd have to wait another 2 hours before starting the next dose. So we start the first dose, and it doesn't really hurt. The nurse just inserts it and we're good to go. Nothing different than when I had my checkups, when the doctor would check my dilation. Yeah, it was just very chill. My mom and Nick were there with me. My mom was going to stay around, kind of see us get set up, and then she was going to leave later in the night. And then Nick, of course, was going to stay there with me. I also had monitors all hooked up to me on my belly. That was so uncomfortable. They were so itchy and so annoying. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so itchy. How am I going to go so many hours with this on? But after a while, I kind of forgot it was there, thankfully. Okay, so we are here in the room. My mom and Nick are here. And we're just chilling. It's about, actually I think it's midnight now, right?
Yeah.
It's midnight. I'm all checked in and everything. Got all my wristbands all hooked up to the machines, and now we're just waiting. So we started with Cytotec. I'm going to try to do 2 doses of those tonight and then start Pitocin in the morning. So hopefully we can get some rest. Nick already looks exhausted. I don't have you on camera. Do you want to be?
You can, that's fine.
Okay.
I'm awake.
Anyways, it's lively in here. It's lit, yo. Anyway, so we're just waiting and waiting. So the Cytotec, I waited 2 hours. I wasn't allowed to pee or anything, which kind of sucked. But yeah, so Cytotec, 2 hours later, the nurse comes in and checks me, and I was barely a little bit different, like just a smidge. So she's like, okay, we're going to have to do another dose. I was like, okay. Okay, so it's almost 1 o'clock. It's been almost 2 hours with the Cytotec, and my contractions have been going up. The green line is my contractions, and then the blue line is his heart rate. And as you can see, the green has definitely been going up and down, so it's been real fun. So we waited another 2 hours. So at this point, it was like 2 o'clock or so, and she then inserted the second dose. At this point, around this point, my mom actually left to go home. We only live 5 minutes from the hospital, so she was gonna go home, get some sleep, and then come back in the morning. And then I just waited. I kind of slept off and on. I tried to get as much sleep as possible, but it was really hard because you have all these monitors and it's beeping. So we put on a movie, and I kind of fell asleep while watching the movie. Nick slept on the couch, which was so uncomfortable. I felt so bad for him. During this point, as soon as I checked in at 10 o'clock, I was not allowed to eat any food whatsoever. That really sucked, and especially because I am hypoglycemic, my blood sugar does drop pretty quickly, and I have to eat frequent snacks. So I talked to the nurse about it, and she said that I could have any kind of like liquid. I mostly drank apple juice throughout my labor, and I had a little bit of chicken broth, and I had Jello once. I hate Jello. I regretted having the Jello. That sucked. That's what I ate for a good while. We waited another 2 hours for the cytotech to kick in and to do its magic. That happened at 4 o'clock. She came in and actually checked me. And at this point, I actually was a little bit more phased and a little bit more dilated. So I was like, yay, that's exciting. We made some progress. Had to wait another 2 hours, and then they would start hooking me up to the Pitocin. And that was what I was most nervous about. I was really, really, really nervous about the Pitocin and just how that would affect the baby, affect my contractions, and just affect me. And at this point, I was having contractions, but they were very minimal and not super regular. There was no consistency to them, and I needed to get on track with consistent contractions to really progress my labor. 6 o'clock rolls around, and they start me on the Pitocin.
So it's 6 in the morning, and we've kind of slept, but not really. I did 2 rounds of the cytotech, and all that did was just help soften my cervix and help dilate me more. Hopefully, if it worked, we'll see. But they're gonna start me on the Pitocin in like 20 minutes or so. I'll get to talk with my doctor. My mom's gonna come back to the hospital, so things are gonna start going. You ready, Nick?
I'm ready.
You ready?
Ready.
You tired? Yeah. And then the past like 6-7 hours, I've just had like contractions and contractions and contractions and contractions. They kind of slowed down a little bit. Yeah, they slowed down a lot, but they were getting pretty bad. So we'll see how the Pitocin goes, all that fun stuff. Yeah.
So she starts me. She just hooks it up to my IV that was like in my arm. Which at this point, like, the IV didn't hurt or anything. I had such amazing nurses that like did such an amazing job, so I was so thankful for that. They were going to up the Pitocin every 30 minutes. And they just like up it by a little bit to kind of keep it going. So she starts me on the lowest dose, and she's like, okay, I'll be back in 30 minutes. I was like, sounds good.
So it is almost 7:30. At 7 o'clock, we started Pitocin, and now we're just upping it every 30 minutes or so until we get to a point that's like good. So yeah, that's what we're doing right now. I know, not very interesting stuff, but it just is what it is.
And my contractions are still they're regulating out a little bit. His heartbeat kind of increases a little bit, which was to be expected, because the Pitocin does affect him a bit as well. We start, and then 30 minutes rolls by, and then she comes in and she ups it again, or ups it for the first time. And so now I'm at like the next step. She comes back a little bit less than 30 minutes later, and she's like, your contractions are getting a little too crazy. And I was like, okay. So she lowers me back down to the base dose, and she's like, that's weird. She's like, I never have to do that, but she was worried because my blood pressure was dropping a little bit, which was a continued thing throughout my entire labor. My blood pressure had a hard time like staying high for some reason. So my contractions kind of start calming back down. At this point, I am actually feeling them a bit. It's not super painful. And at this point, I don't even have any medicine in me besides the Pitocin. I have no pain medication. So I just kept getting through my contractions, and there was points where like they would peak and I'd be like, oh, that's a little intense, but it was never painful. And she comes in, tries to up my dosage again after I regulated a bit, and she upped it, and then that really started my contractions like kind of going a little bit more consistent, but they still like were off and on. So 8 o'clock rolls around, and my doctor actually comes and visits me. And she's like, hey, how's it going? I'm like, it's good, just chilling, looking like crap now. I'm kind of tired at this point, but I kept trying to, get some sleep throughout. And she's like, okay, well, we're actually going to break your water. And I was like, oh, okay, sounds good. And I remember my very first nurse had told me, don't get your water broken until you've had your epidural, because she had countless times met women that got their water broke, and then they were in pain, their contractions just skyrocketed, and they were like, I need my epidural now, I'm in so much pain. At this point, I hadn't had my epidural yet, but I didn't want to say, no doctor, let me wait for my epidural before my water breaks. So I was like, okay, sounds good, but can I get my epidural right after I get it done? And she's like, yeah, totally, no problem. So my doctor breaks my water, and it's like this huge gush. Oh my gosh, so like gross. It's just gross. And it's not like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's just like a gushing waterfall of water coming out of you. That's like the best way I know how to explain it. Nick was watching, Nick's just like, oh my gosh. And I'm just like, this is fun. And they had to like put like rags and stuff to clean it up because it was just so much water. It didn't hurt or anything, which was really nice. It was just like this weird kind of movement that I could feel, and then all of a sudden just gushes of water. My doctor's like, okay, your contractions should start speeding up. They should start, you know, coming quicker and coming a little bit more intense. And I was like, okay, sounds good. Let me make sure I get my epidural though. And she's like, yes, of course.
So it's 8:21 now, and they just broke my water. So I should start feeling contractions even a bit more, a bit harder. So I'll probably be getting my epidural soon. Definitely gonna want that. So yeah, my mom should also be here soon. Ooh. As I get a contraction. Anyways, so things are actually going pretty well and going pretty fast. So Snick. Got me more water. What?
Did your mom answer?
No, I haven't called her yet. Thank you for the water. Anyways, so she's bringing Nick food. He's hungry. Oh, and yeah.
So now that my water had been broken, that just means that his head didn't have the little cushion of the water being there. His head was now against my pelvis, or my cervix, not my pelvis, but my cervix. And so with contractions, it would kind of force his head to hit a little bit more onto my cervix, which allowed it to open up more. My contractions did, within that time, start speeding up, and they were a little bit more painful, but no pain that like I couldn't ever handle. Time passes, and my mom was actually supposed to come in by this time, but she's like, oh, I have to run some errands for because my brothers were at home and everything, because it was before school started. And so she was like, okay, I need to get some stuff done before I come. And I'm like, okay, no problem. My water's broke though, so that's gonna speed things up. Also at this point, my doctor had checked me, and I was only at almost a 3. I was almost a 3 centimeters dilated, and I think I was 100% effaced, or almost 100% effaced. I was moving up a bit, but not really anything too crazy. So I only had to wait about 30 minutes, nothing too crazy. My contractions weren't painful during that time, just a little uncomfortable, just like how they had been. And the Pitocin at this point, we had kind of just kept at that level, because every time they tried to up it, my blood pressure would kind of drop. It would just cause my contractions to kind of go all over the place and be too intense. They were making the contractions come too quickly, and I wasn't dilated enough for it to work. But anyway, so the anesthesiologist comes in. He's super, super nice, which I was so happy about. He was super friendly and talked me through it. He was like, what do you want to know? And I was like, nothing. Just put this needle in my back. I don't want to see it. I don't want to know anything. Let's just do this. I was really nervous about it. But anyway, so my mom had actually made it at that point. She had to step out of the room. And it was just Nick and I, and then the nurse, and the anesthesiologist. I feel like I'm saying that so wrong. Anesthesiologist. I can't speak. Nick sat in front of me, and I had to kind of like hunch my back a bit, and I just held Nick's hands and squeezed them because I was so nervous. And yeah, I just am not a needle person at all. And I had heard that it can be painful to get your epidural. So I was like, you know what? The pain of the epidural is worth that over the pain of a natural labor. I just knew my body, and I knew me, and it's something that at this point in time, I knew physically I just would not be able to handle the pain of labor and all that. So I was like, I need my epidural. He did one like poke of like the local anesthetic to kind of numb the area. That hurt, that stung a lot. And then he did the second thing of however they do it, I don't know. It wasn't like the most intense pain I've ever had in my life or anything like that. But it did hurt. It wasn't painful, I wouldn't say that, but it hurt. But I made sure to not move. I was really nervous about that, about like if I twitched or something, that can cause him to mess up, and that's a whole mess of problems. But he said I did really good, that I didn't move or anything. Maybe a minute or two later, I started feeling like this like fuzzy, warm, flowing to my legs. It was very indescribable feeling, and it's almost kind of like when you've been sitting on your arm too long or your leg too long, and it's like that tingly fuzzy feeling, but like also really, really warm. It was only from my waist down, but 5 minutes in I started getting really itchy, which I guess is a normal side effect for it, and it only lasted for about an hour, but I was itchy, and it was mostly on my stomach that I was like itching. That itching was worse than any of the pain I had felt from my contractions or anything up to this point. That itchiness like drove me crazy, because like I kept itching it, but it kept still itching, and like, oh, just thinking about that makes me just like, oh no. And I started getting itchy like on my face. I kept having to itch my face, and I didn't even obviously have the epidural on my face, but I guess that's just a side effect that happens. Anyway, so now my water's broken. I have my epidural, so I'm not feeling any pain, no contractions. I'm all like, this is fun, this is great. I had an amazing nurse, and Nick and my mom were there, and we were just chilling.
Anyways, so it is almost noon, and they have done a lot. I got my water broken back around, it was 8 o'clock or so, 8:30ish. They broke my water so that my contractions could become stronger, and they did. So then I requested for an epidural because I was already planning on getting one. So I got my epidural, and yeah, so now here I am, and I'm having a bunch of contractions, but I can't feel them, so I'm all good with that. And then they said I'm at a 5.5 centimeters dilated, which is good, and that I'll dilate about 1 centimeter every hour, hopefully. So that puts us around 4 or 5 o'clock with being able to start pushing then and everything. So, and what's also cool is that it's the solar eclipse today. So we've been watching the news and all the solar eclipse stuff that's been going on, and it's pretty dark outside. It just got done here, but yeah. So Nick went to go get some lunch, and my mom is hanging out with me, and we're just chilling and stuff. So yeah, so that's what we're doing. We're just waiting for me to keep dilating some more, but my contractions are like right where they need to be, so that's pretty good.
So my dilation started speeding up, and that was great because I wanted to get this baby out of me. I was ready. His heart rate stayed really great throughout the entire process. The only problem was my blood pressure would just drop a little bit, and so they did have to give me medicine because my blood pressure dropped too low and I was gonna throw up, and I felt really sick. And I'm not exactly sure what point that was. I just know it was a couple hours after my epidural. But after they gave me that medicine to kind of help my blood pressure, then I was all good to go. And I just continued dilating. I was having contractions, but I couldn't feel a single thing of them. And so from about noon to, what would I say, like 6 o'clock, everything was just very chill. We just were waiting. I wasn't in pain or anything like that besides the almost throwing up at one point. That really sucked. And then I also did ask for, I think it was Demerol, maybe not, I don't know, it might have been called Emerson, but it was just nausea medicine that I wanted to have for when I started pushing. It was actually from my cousin who has had 2 babies that she said to have the nausea medicine on board, because during her labor, her first labor, she kept throwing up and throwing up and throwing up. And being that I had already felt nauseous earlier in the day, I was like, I definitely want that medicine to be there so that I'm not throwing up everywhere and taking my mind away from being able to actually focus on pushing. Also, during this time of waiting, the nurse checked my dilation and checked on Emerson, and she realized he had actually flipped. And so now, instead of his head facing down towards the floor, his head was facing up towards my stomach and the sky. And for him to fully, go through the canal and come out in a nice way, we needed to flip him over. So during the time of waiting, she gave me this huge peanut ball, is what it was called. And it's like this kind of squishy exercise ball, but it's in a peanut shape. So it's kind of like, it's big and then goes in a bit and then comes out and is big again. And so she put that between my legs, and I had to flip over to my sides. And we just continued doing that, and I just sat there with it. That was it. That's all I had to do. My legs are numb too at this point, so when I'd have to flip over, she'd have to like lift my leg, and I was just like all flimsy and like I had no control over my leg. And then she checked me again right before we started kind of going towards pushing. And he was back to facing my spine and face down. So that was good, because I was really nervous, because if I had to start delivering him with him face up, then that could cause his head to not come through, and it could cause pelvic issues and just a whole mess of problems. So I was really glad we were able to flip him back over.
So it is 4:30, and I'm now at a 7 centimeters dilated, which is really great, and 100% fully effaced. So we're just waiting for those last 3 centimeters, and then we'll get to start pushing, which is really exciting, and hopefully that will happen within the next couple of hours. Things started moving a little bit faster in the past like 20 minutes or so, so that's good. Stuff's happening, and he should be here hopefully soon-ish. Hopefully.
I just know by the evening time I was pretty close to being fully dilated. My contractions were staying consistent and things were going really well.
What time is it? It is 5:44, and I am 9 centimeters dilated, and we're just waiting for me to get to that 10 so that I can start pushing, and hopefully he'll be here really soon, and then I can eat real food. I'm excited.
7 o'clock rolls around. My nurse changes because they change every 12 hours. And so at this point I was just getting kind of exhausted, kind of tired. I was like, okay, I'm just ready. Like, let's do this. Let's get this baby out. I started pushing with my nurse right before her shift change. So it's a little bit before 7 actually. And so she's like, hey, we can start pushing. You're 10 centimeters dilated. You're 100% effaced. You can do this now. And I was like, thank goodness, I'm so ready. So my mom and Nick, they both were on my side, and they're like, okay, let's do this. And I was like, okay, sounds good. Right before we were about to start pushing, my nurse goes, hey Nick, how involved do you want to be in, the labor process or the delivery process? And I look at Nick, because I had told him, I'm like, you better stay up here by my face. Do not head on down there. We're gonna be up here by my face. Nick and I look at each other, and then Nick goes, I want to be very involved. And I was like, good luck, have fun. Probably gonna be scarred for life. And then my nurse was like, do you want a mirror to see? And I was like, heck no, I don't. I do not want to see that. It will just, it will not help me. It will not help me at all. I just need to like not see it and just stay focused. So she's like, okay Nick, you're going to push back her one leg and count to 10. And Nick's like, okay, sounds good. And then the nurse held my other leg, and my mom just stayed up by me, and she didn't hold my hand or anything. I think she just stayed up by me and just kind of helped out wherever. They had these like stirrups that come out of the bed. You put your legs on them, it like raises it up, and your legs are just open for the world to see. So I had the nurse on one leg and Nick on my other leg. And so we watched my contractions, and every time it would go to a peak, because I could actually see them up and down. As soon as it started climbing towards a peak, that's when I'd have to start pushing. So we waited for a contraction to kind of calm down, and then I saw my next one coming up. And so I had to lean forward, which was, after a while, like, it's very tiring, but I had to lean forward, hold my legs, like squeeze towards my legs, while they pushed my legs towards me. And then Nick would count to 10 as I tried to push during those 10 seconds. Then I would take a breath. He would count to 10 again. I'd push. Then I'd take a breath. I'd push for 10 seconds again. He'd count. And then after that, the contraction would be over. And so I had to do that for every contraction that came every 1 to 2 minutes. So at first, you have the energy for it. You're like, okay, I'm doing this. It's kind of hard, but let's do this. It's hard finding like where to push. It's very hard to explain. And the nurse explained it basically as if you're going number 2 to the bathroom. But it doesn't fully feel like that either. It's just like this weird kind of pushing sensation that you just find within you. And at first it just felt like I was not going anywhere. I felt like nothing was changing. But about 20 minutes in or so, that's when they said, oh, I can see his head. So that meant I was making progress. That meant Emerson was making progress. And that was good. They were able to start seeing, the crown of his head, but not like fully out or anything, just a little peak of hair. So they weren't going to call in the doctor and everyone else that follows in with the doctor until Emerson had finally crowned his head, which is like basically the whole circumference of his head is sticking out. And that's when they would say, oh, we're ready for the doctor, and then the doctor would finish up the delivery. So basically it's just me, my mom, Nick, and the nurse just pushing. At this point my nurse had changed, I had a different nurse. I'm pushing and I'm pushing and I'm pushing. We're almost an hour in and I had made progress, but not like full progress. There was a point in there when I was pushing that I felt like I kind of had lost like the groove that I had been in, and it was hard for me to kind of get back into that groove of the pushing and the movement that I had. So that kind of sucked. I felt like I was just kind of pushing but nothing was really happening. And then I finally, almost about the hour in, like I finally had gotten back to my groove. But it was at this point that all of a sudden I was like, I came out of pushing and I was like, I'm gonna throw up. And so my mom grabbed one of the little bags they had. It's like a huge bag, plastic bag with a ring on it for you to throw up in. She grabs that because we had one, and I leaned over and I threw up and I threw up and I threw up and I threw up. Yeah, I think I threw up 4 times. And at this point, I started sweating. I had sweat literally coming off of me, which I've never had in my entire life. My mom's like taking wet washcloths, and I'm starting to throw up, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And so it was at this point in time that like I just felt really exhausted and tired. I felt like I was kind of making progress, but not fully there. I was starting to get really tired physically. That was not fun. And it was at this point that I was like, in my head, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I was like, I don't want to have this baby come out of me anymore. Like, can we like not do this? Which obviously I'm fully invested and I'm too invested that I can't stop at this point. Then I sucked it back up and I was like, okay, Brittany, let's keep going. About 10 to 15 minutes later, I'm pushing, and then all of a sudden they say, oh, he's crowning. Let's get the doctor in. I go, hallelujah, thank you. Obviously, I don't say any of that. I was just very focused. I didn't cry. I never got upset. I just kept saying, okay, let's go, let's push, let's do this, let's do this. And at this point, I wasn't even watching the monitor anymore. I wasn't watching the monitor to see where my contractions were. I could just feel when I needed to push. I could kind of feel when a contraction would start coming, and I was like, okay, I need to push now and I need to push. All of a sudden, like, nurses and doctors come in, and they have the baby nurse that comes in that will take care of him and check him out. They have another nurse that comes in as an assistant, and then the doctor. What had sucked, and I found out hours before this even happened, but my doctor came in and was like, oh, I won't be able to deliver your baby. And I go, what? Apparently, I guess her shift had ended and she couldn't stick around or anything like that, which makes sense. Thankfully, this doctor that delivered our baby was a doctor that we had actually seen for one appointment during my prenatal checkups. And it was because my doctor was away on vacation and I needed to still have my checkup. So I had already met him. I already approved of him because he was really nice and everything. So I was thankful for that. It was also the same doctor that delivered my nephew. So that was kind of cool. Fast forward, the doctor comes in and he gets all set up. They take off part of my bed, like the part of the bed I was on comes off. The doctor moves up real close to my legs. My mom, I think, came over to my other side, and then Nick was on my one side. Nick didn't have to keep pushing my legs anymore and counting because he had continued doing that the entire hour, almost hour and a half. I really, after that, don't fully remember too much going on. And it was really scary now, like looking back on it. But yeah, at that point, after them saying, oh, we're ready for the doctor now, I don't really remember too much. It was almost like I mentally blacked out, even though physically I was still there. In the moment, I didn't realize I was like blacking out, but looking back on it, I was like, I don't remember a gap of time in there. I know for 100% fact that I kept pushing, obviously, and I know that I kept moving forward to continue pushing. But I remember my eyes it was really hard for my eyes to stay open. The only other thing that I remember at this point is that right before they called the doctor in, I could feel his head on my pelvic bone and like sitting there. Oh my gosh, that was the most intense pain I have ever experienced in my entire life. Like, that was so painful. His head is just sitting there, and at this point I had to kind of wait a little bit, and of course I always had to wait in between contractions, so I'm pushing for a good 30 seconds, but then my contraction goes down. I have to wait another minute or two with this baby's head slightly sticking out, and I couldn't push yet because I had to wait for the contraction. And that waiting period and that little time, that small space of time where I'm waiting, was really, really painful. So it was after that feeling, I kept having that feeling, that I just like mentally blacked out. So from the time of the doctor saying, okay, and the time Emerson was born, which was about 10 to 15 minutes after the doctor said, okay, let's do this, I don't remember anything at all. So during this time, I just continued pushing like normal. I just had no clue, nor do I remember of anything that was going on, of anyone talking to me, etc., etc. I don't remember it. And at 8:33 p.m. on August 21st, 2017, little Emerson Nicholas Link was born, and oh my gosh, I was so just thankful to have him just out. And I don't know, it was just so amazing of an experience. I remember them pulling him out of me, the doctor pulling him out of me, and then all of a sudden just hearing his crying. Everything just felt crazy. Everyone was like, oh my gosh. I remember like looking at Nick, and Nick was crying, and my mom, I don't even know where my mom was at this point. And I just remember looking all around and just kind of being in shock almost. Like, I don't know, I knew he had been born, I knew he was out, but then part of me was like, oh, am I done pushing? Like, I've been pushing for almost 2 hours now. Am I done pushing? And it didn't click in my head that like, oh, your baby is here, until a good minute in after he was born. And they placed him on my chest. He came out peeing, by the way. They put him on my chest. They didn't cut the cord yet. They wanted to wait for the cord or the blood supply and the nutrients from the placenta to continue pushing all of it out, and then it would stop at some point, and that's when they would cut the cord. So they put him on me with the cord still attached to my placenta, which was still inside me, of course. I'm supposed to be like holding him, and I'm supposed to be like, oh my gosh, this is my baby, and my body was so weak, so physically weak, that I was just like shaking, and like I kept trying to like hold him, but like I was so out of it. Like my mind was gone. I was out of it physically. I was out of it, and I was just like, okay. And I remember I just kept patting him and patting him, and I remember I didn't really say anything. I was just like, oh yay. Like I was just like, oh. But I think I had just pushed for so long that it wore me out. I was gone. The placenta stopped sending nutrients to the cord, so then Nick got to cut the cord. I think I told my mom, or I told Nick, and I was just like, I can't hold him, because they're like, Brittany, hold him, and I was just like, I can't hold him. And so they're like, okay. So the baby nurse came and took him away. They just went to go clean him up and wrap him up so he'd be warm and give him to Nick. And then I had to deliver my placenta. So as a lot of you guys have known, and I talked about it in my pregnancy updates, I had an anterior placenta, which just means the placenta, instead of it being behind the baby, is actually attached to the front of my stomach, or my uterus wall, and it's in front of the baby. So the baby would be chilling here, and then the cord is attached here, and my placenta is on the front, when normally your placenta is supposed to be anywhere else but the front. So it had never been an issue. I always asked all the doctors, and every time I went in, I was like, is my placenta gonna be an issue? They're like, no, your placenta is totally fine, like it's not a big deal. Normally your placenta is supposed to take about 5 to 10 minutes to deliver. 5 and 10 minutes passed by of the doctor pushing on my stomach, like pushing on my stomach so hard, trying to push my placenta off of me, because your placenta is supposed to go, oh, there's no baby there, and just like detach off your wall. Mine didn't want to do that, and so it continued. 5-10 minutes passes by, the doctor's still pushing, he's still waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. Obviously he's done this millions of times. Thank goodness I had an epidural, or else that would have been so painful, like so painful. And at this point now he's starting to get like worried, and I can tell like on his face he looks worried, and all the nurses and everyone gets really quiet, and we're all just kind of waiting for my placenta to come out, because if he can't get my placenta out, then I would have to go in for a C-section and they'd have to cut it out of me. And then he apologizes to me again. He had to go in with his hand and yank it out. That's why he apologized to me. He said, "I'm sorry," and then yanked out my placenta. I felt something kind of move within me, and all of a sudden, this is disgusting, I'm so sorry. All of a sudden my placenta just drops out. And you have to remember, the placenta is fairly big. I was a little bit overdue, and Emerson actually ended up being way bigger of a baby than expected. So your placenta has to feed your baby. So the bigger the baby, the bigger the placenta. My placenta was pretty big. So he finally gets it out. It just plops out and just gushes and gushes and gushes of blood just come out. I am so sorry if this is grossing you out. I'm so sorry. This just is what it is. This is what a labor and delivery story is. That was like just a really intense moment. And he then had to go in with another tool and scrape out my uterus to make sure no pieces were left behind. Because if you have pieces of your placenta left behind, it can cause you to have an infection. It can cause a lot of really bad things to happen. They continued massaging my uterus and massaging my like stomach, and the nurses had to come in and like push really, really hard to make sure that all the blood was coming out, all the clots were coming out, and like everything was staying good. He then turned to the nurse, asked for something. I see him get basically a needle and some string. And I guess I had a tear, but it was only one small little tear. It was just a 1st-degree tear, so nothing too major. That was one thing I was really, really nervous about, was having tears, because there's women that like, thankfully mine was just a really small one. He just had to stitch me up real quick and I was good to go. So he stitched me up, he said congratulations, and then he left. And I was like, thanks. Like I said, so thankful I had the epidural, because with the stitches, my placenta, them having to push on my uterus so freaking hard, I would not have survived. Plus the pushing of Emerson's head, or the pressure of Emerson's head on my cervix and coming out of me. I don't think I could have done it without an epidural. Like honestly, there was just so many things that happened that like looking back, I was like, that would have been so painful. That would have been so painful to have to feel. At this point, Nick has been holding Emerson because things got pretty serious with my placenta and whatnot. And it was during this time, you're supposed to have, after you deliver your baby and everything, you're supposed to have 1 hour where you're able to kind of just spend time. No one is in the room, no nurses or anything. It's just you guys, and you're just spending time with your baby, skin to skin, and starting to kind of breastfeed if you're going to do that. And it's just a bonding kind of hour. I did not get that because of my placenta, which took 30 minutes extra to deliver. And then also them having to keep an eye on me because of it. My blood pressure had dropped a little bit, so they had to just make sure everything was okay. That's basically it. After that, I just had my recovery. Everything went pretty well with my recovery. And my recovery I will talk about in my postpartum video, because that's just a whole nother kind of chunk. This is my labor and delivery. He weighed 8 pounds and 14 ounces, which basically is almost 9 pounds. My doctor told me he was only supposed to be like barely 7.5 pounds. So I had a way bigger baby than expected. He was 21 inches long, which is pretty long of a baby, but he is super healthy, he's super adorable, and like I said, you guys will get to see him in his 1 month update. I'm really excited to show you guys that, or to show you him, not that. It was a pretty intense thing, but such a blessing. I'm so thankful that I got to experience that. I'm so thankful that I got to experience a vaginal birth. That was something I really wanted. And honestly, I'm glad I was induced. I'm glad it went the way it went. If I had waited any longer, waited for my body to activate into labor, he would have come out over 9 pounds, and I possibly would have had to have a C-section because I would not have been able to get him through my pelvis. So I think it was a blessing, and I think God was definitely whispering to me to have my induction and not cancel it. I'm just really thankful that, you know, both him and I are healthy, and we've had a great recovery, and everything has just gone really well, and it's continued just to go well, and I'm just really thankful for that. But yes, I'm so sorry again for not being here for so long and not talking with you guys. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm really sorry for like the gross stuff I apologize. But thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. And also, if you're not already subscribed and would like to be, make sure to click that button down below. I also have social media links where you guys can see a sneak peek at Emerson. I have pictures and stuff on Twitter and on Instagram, so make sure to go check those out if you would like to. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Bye!